July 17, 1981. A winter Friday in Itatiaia National Park. Overnight, the temperature had plummeted to 3 degrees below zero, and wind gusts of up to 70 kilometers per hour swept across the highest peaks of the Mantiqueira Mountains. Marcos Antônio Vieira, a 32-year-old journalist for the Folha do Vale newspaper, had set out alone on an expedition to Agulhas Negras Peak, the park's highest point at 2,791 meters. Marcos was well known for his weekly column on the environment and ecotourism. An amateur photographer and experienced mountaineer, he had scaled the peaks of Itatiaia numerous times over the past 5 years. He was planning a special feature on the preservation of the national park, which was the very first created in Brazil back in 1937. That morning, Marcos registered his entry at the control post of the IBDF, the institute that managed the park at the time. The guard, Josue Pereira, noted Marcos's arrival at 7:15 a.m. The journalist stated his plan to spend the day photographing the region around the Prateleiras and Agulhas Negras Peak, with an expected return time of 5:30 p.m. He was well equipped with a backpack containing water, food, a raincoat, a flashlight, his Pentax K1000 camera, and a notepad. He seemed well prepared and knew the region intimately. Nothing suggested that anything could go wrong, Josue would later report to investigators. By 6:30 p.m., with the sun having already set and no sign of Marcos, the park employee reported his absence to the director, Ricardo Mendes, who immediately activated the search protocol. An initial team of 4 rangers scoured the main trail until 9 o'clock p.m., when darkness and the intense cold forced them to suspend the search. The following morning, July 18th, a much larger operation was organized. 22 men from the Resende Fire Department, 6 military police officers, and 12 volunteers, including seasoned mountaineers, formed teams to sweep the main trails and adjacent areas. News of the disappearance reached Marcos's family around 10 o'clock that Saturday morning. His wife, Helena Vieira, a 30-year-old biology teacher, and their 2 children, 7-year-old Lucas and 5-year-old Carolina, were at home when they received a visit from Paulo Monteiro, the editor-in-chief of the newspaper where Marcos worked. "I knew something was wrong when he didn't come home that night," Helena told the press days later. Marcos was extremely responsible. He would never remain out of touch for so long. On Sunday, July 19th, the search intensified. A military police helicopter surveyed the region for 4 hours, while ground teams expanded the search radius. They found only an empty water bottle, which might have belonged to Marcos, near a fork in the trail to Agulhas Negras, at an altitude of about 2,500 meters. The weather, however, worsened drastically that afternoon. A dense foam blanketed the highest peaks, reducing visibility to less than 5 meters. And the temperature dropped to 2 degrees below zero during the night. The adverse conditions persisted for the next 3 days, severely hampering the operations. It was not until July 23rd, after a week of intense searching involving more than 50 people daily, that the team found the first piece of concrete evidence. The navy blue cap with the Folha do Vale logo, which Marcos always wore on his expeditions, was found wedged between rocks about 300 meters off the main trail, in a hard-to-reach area known as the Echo Valley. The discovery of the cap redirected the entire operation to this treacherous geological formation, characterized by steep slopes and dense high-altitude vegetation. Detective Ronaldo Bastos assigned investigator Claudio Ferreira to lead the police inquiry, while the search continued under the command of Major Roberto Almeida of the fire department. On July 25th, 2 more clues emerged: shreds of green plastic identified as part of Marcos's raincoat, and marks suggesting someone had slipped down a rocky slope. The mountaineering experts on the search team formulated a hypothesis. The journalist might have strayed from the trail to take a photograph and, caught by the sudden turn in the weather, had suffered a fall. The Echo Valley region is extremely treacherous, explained local mountaineer and guide Antonio Serrano, who was volunteering in the search. Fog can roll in within minutes, completely disorienting even experienced people. On top of that, the rocks become incredibly slippery with the moisture. Marcos's family stayed at a guest house near the park throughout the initial search period. Helena provided crucial details about the equipment he carried, including the type and color of his backpack, camera, and clothing. This information was vital in guiding what the rescuers should be looking for. On July 28th, after nearly 2 weeks of uninterrupted searching, Marcos's backpack was found. It was partially submerged in a small pond formed between rocks, approximately 800 meters below where the cap had been located. The backpack contained his water-damaged camera, a soaked and illegible notepad, and a broken compass. The state of the item suggested a significant fall. In early August, as the search area was expanded and rappel techniques were used to access steeper regions, investigators found what appeared to be bloodstains on a rock formation known as God's Finger, about 500 meters from where the backpack was found. Samples were sent for analysis and confirmed to be human blood, compatible with Marcos's O-positive blood type. The investigation took an unexpected turn on August 12th, when rumors began to circulate that Marcos had been working on an investigative report about the illegal extraction of rare minerals in the national park. Paulo Monteiro, the newspaper's editor-in-chief, confirmed that the journalist had mentioned some concerning discoveries related to illegal activities in the region, but had not detailed the exact nature of his suspicions. This revelation led Detective Bastos to open a parallel line of inquiry, considering the possibility of foul play. Interviews were conducted with park employees, local guides, and residents. 2 temporary park rangers hired 3 months before the disappearance became suspects after giving contradictory statements about their whereabouts on the day Marcos vanished. Carlos Mendonça and Rodolfo Pires initially claimed to have remained at the base station all day on July 17th. However, a park visitor, university professor Jorge Almeida, stated he had seen 2 men in IBDF uniforms in a restricted area near Agulas Negras at the very time they claimed to be at the post. Confronted with this contradiction, the guards changed their stories, stating they had conducted a routine patrol in that area but had forgotten to mention it. The police obtained search warrants for their homes, but nothing incriminating was found. Without concrete evidence to support the theory of a crime, this line of investigation eventually lost momentum. In September 1981, after 52 days of intensive searching that had mobilized over 200 people at different times, the official operation was called off. The fire department's final report concluded that the most likely scenario was an accident. Marcos had likely strayed from the main trail to take photographs, was caught off guard by the region's characteristically rapid weather change, became disoriented in the fog, and suffered a fatal fall somewhere in the Echo Valley. Despite the official conclusion, volunteer groups of mountaineers and friends of Marcos continued to conduct sporadic searches for the next 2 years, always returning with no new discoveries. Helena never fully accepted the official conclusion and, with the support of the newspaper, kept the search for answers alive. The years passed without any significant developments in Marcos Vieira's case. Helena refused to request a declaration of presumptive death, which would have been possible after 5 years. "Without a body, without definitive proof, I cannot accept that he is dead," she declared in an interview on the 5th anniversary of his disappearance. In 1986, a flicker of hope emerged when a German tourist claimed to have seen a man resembling Marcos living in an isolated community in the state of Paraná. Police investigated the lead but found it was a former university professor who had decided to abandon urban life after an existential crisis. The physical resemblance was merely a coincidence. Between 1987 and 1990, the case remained stagnant. Helena returned to teaching full-time to support her children, who grew up marked by their father's unexplained absence. Every year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, the newspaper published an article remembering the case and demanding a definitive resolution from the authorities. Then in 1991, 10 years after he vanished, an unexpected event reignited public interest. A former park employee, Sebastián Rodriguez, gave an interview to a television program claiming there had been internal pressure to quickly close the search and that important areas of the park had not been properly explored. There were interests in keeping certain regions of the park from being searched too thoroughly, Sebastián declared. There were rumors of illegal mining in the more remote areas, and Marcos might have discovered something related to that. His statement prompted the public prosecutor's office to request a reopening of the investigation. A new team was assigned to review all case materials and conduct new interviews. The two previously suspected guards, Carlos Mendonça and Rodolfo Pires, no longer worked at the park. Mendonça had moved to another state, and Pires had died in a car accident in 1989. The renewed investigation did confirm that illegal extraction of quartz crystals and aquamarine had occurred in remote areas of the park between 1980 and 1983. A confidential report documented an operation that dismantled the scheme 6 months after Marcos's disappearance. However, no direct connection to the journalist's case was ever established, and the accident hypothesis remained the most officially accepted one. In August 1994, another disturbing element emerged. Marcos's notepad, recovered from his backpack in 1981 and deemed illegible due to water damage, was subjected to advanced document restoration techniques. A few phrases were recovered, including notes about suspicious movement in the northeast area and trucks during the early morning hours. These notes seemed to lend chilling credibility to the theory that Marcos was investigating illegal activities in the park. On July 17, 1995, exactly 14 years after Marcos Vieira disappeared, a discovery was made that would definitively change the course of the case. Evandro Soares, a 28-year-old experienced climber, was on a solo ascent in a rarely visited area of the park, known as Garganta do Registro, a deep fissure between rock walls approximately 3 kilometers from the main trail. While descending a particularly steep wall, Evandro spotted what looked like synthetic fabric wedged between the rocks, about 60 meters below the cliff's edge. Intrigued and thinking it was merely trash left by a careless visitor, he decided to investigate. As he got closer, he discovered the tattered remains of a faded blue jacket partially covering human remains, weathered bones still partially articulated. It was a moment of absolute shock, Evandro later stated in his deposition. I realized immediately that I had found someone who had died there and had never been located. The climber, carrying a radio communicator, immediately contacted the park rangers. A complex recovery operation was organized, involving climbers from the fire department and forensic experts. It took 2 days to retrieve the remains and the belongings found at the site. Alongside the human remains, they found fragments of a blue jacket with the partially visible logo of the Folha do Vale newspaper. A Seiko wristwatch stopped at 437, a university class ring, and, most significantly, a small waterproof Minox C camera, which Marcos had carried as a secondary, more discreet piece of equipment. The remains were sent to the Medical Legal Institute, where DNA tests, a technology unavailable in 1981, confirmed they belonged to Marcos Antônio Vieira. The forensic analysis revealed fractures to the skull, ribs, left femur, and both arms, all consistent with a fall from a great height. There was no evidence of injuries from firearms or sharp instruments. The most disturbing element, however, lay within the small Minox camera. Originally developed as a spy camera during the Cold War, this model was water-resistant and extremely compact. The film inside, after a painstaking recovery process, revealed 15 black and white photographs. The first 7 showed the park's natural landscapes. The remaining 8, however, documented something far more sinister. Unmarked trucks parked in a remote clearing, men hauling mining equipment, and 2 particularly damning photographs. Individuals in what appeared to be park ranger uniforms, accepting packages from a man in civilian clothes next to a jeep. The photographs, recovered from Marcos's camera, unleashed an unprecedented federal investigation into corruption and environmental crimes within Itatiaia National Park. In August 1995, the Federal Public Prosecutor's Office, in collaboration with the federal police, formed a task force dedicated exclusively to the case. Federal Prosecutor Mauricio Castillo, appointed to lead the inquiry, secured search and seizure warrants for the homes and offices of former park employees who had worked there between 1980 and 1985. Documents discovered at the home of Ricardo Mendes, the park's former director, included undeclared financial records and correspondence linking him to businessmen in the mining sector. Carlos Mendonça, one of the guards from the photographs, was tracked down to Cuiabá, Mato Grosso. There he was living a lifestyle far beyond the means of his declared income. When confronted with the photographic evidence, he confessed to his part in the illegal mining scheme but initially denied any involvement in Marcos's death. Then in September 1995, under intense investigative pressure, Mendonça finally revealed what truly happened. On July 17, 1981. According to his testimony, he and another guard, Rodolfo Pires, were escorting a shipment of illegally extracted minerals when they were photographed by someone hidden among the rocks. They gave chase and soon recognized the photographer as the journalist who had entered the park that morning. "We just wanted the camera and the film. We never meant to hurt him," Mendonça claimed in his deposition. "When we caught up to him near the Registro Gorge, an argument broke out. He refused to hand over the camera and threatened to expose us. During the struggle, Rodolfo pushed him. He lost his footing and fell down the steep slope. We could see it was a bad fall, but we didn't go down to check. We just left the area and later reported that we hadn't seen him during our patrol." The forensic analysis concluded that Marcos had initially survived the fall. He had dragged himself for approximately 30 meters to where his body was ultimately found, but likely succumbed to internal injuries within a few hours. The watch, stopped at 6:37 p.m., was consistent with the approximate time of the incident as described in Mendonça's testimony. The illegal mining operation, as the investigation would reveal, involved the removal of semi-precious minerals and high-purity quartz from restricted areas of the park, primarily during periods of low tourist traffic. The operation was coordinated by Ricardo Mendes, who received a percentage of the profits and relied on at least 5 park guards to provide security and ensure the mining sites were never inspected. In December 1995, the Federal Public Prosecutor's Office indicted 8 individuals on a range of charges, including manslaughter for Carlos Mendonça, concealment of a corpse, corruption, environmental damage, and criminal conspiracy. Ricardo Mendes, identified as the ringleader, received the harshest sentence, 18 years in prison. Carlos Mendonça was sentenced to 12 years for manslaughter. concealment of a corpse, and other environmental crimes. In January 1996, 14 and a half years after he vanished, Marcos Antônio Vieira was finally laid to rest with full honors. Over 1,000 people attended the ceremony in Resenda, including journalists, environmentalists, and public officials. The Folha do Vale published a special edition dedicated to its reporter, highlighting how his work, even in death, had dismantled a criminal enterprise. For Helena and her children, now adults, there was finally the closure they had so desperately sought. The pain never truly goes away, but at last we know the truth. Marcos died doing what he believed in, defending nature and pursuing the truth, Helena declared at the funeral. As a direct result of the case, the Brazilian government implemented significant changes to security and oversight protocols in its national parks. The Marcos Vieira Protocol was established, creating stricter procedures for the selection and supervision of employees, along with more efficient systems for monitoring visitors. In 2001, 20 years after his disappearance, the Marcos Vieira Memorial was inaugurated at the Itatiaia National Park Visitor Center, a space dedicated to his memory and to the role of investigative journalism in environmental protection. The recovered Minox camera and the photographs that documented the crime are on permanent display, a stark reminder to all visitors of the price sometimes paid in the pursuit of truth. If you've listened this far, it's because you care about these stories that leave a permanent mark on families. Let me know by leaving a comment that says, "I listened to the end." It helps me know who is truly dedicated to the search for truth. And please don't forget to like and share this video so that this extraordinary quest for justice can reach even more people.